Okay, my name is Avant, and the name of my study is Consumer Reaction to Online Feedback, a study in attribution theory. So, having a little background here, large online retailers such as Amazon.com, Overstock.com, and auction sites like eBay.com utilize feedback mechanisms or online reviews in order to guide consumer behavior. And these online reviews become powerful word-of-mouth drivers for the decision to purchase. Now, one of the most important aspects of these online reviews is perceived credibility. In fact, research shows that purchase decisions often hinge on the credibility of the source. So that's basically the focus of my study. And I wanted to take a look at perceived credibility of online reviews through the eyes of attribution theory. Now, attribution theory, if you're unaware, is basically cause and effect. Social psychologists use this theory. Basically, it would be like why does Billy do such and such? And the answer would be because of so-and-so. And so what I wanted to do is take a look at the question, why does the consumer find a particular online review credible? So I conducted an online experiment. It was a 2x2 factorial design looking at the influence of two independent variables, text length and name identifiers. Text length meaning exactly how long the review would be. Name identifier, whether or not it would be like Pat Jones versus, say, Manic Mojo 77 on my dependent variable, which is perceived credibility. So I created 4 stimuli. I based them on Amazon.com reviews. I think the product in question was the Office Season 2 DVD box set. I figured, because of my sample, and I'll get to that in a bit, I figured this is a highly rated, popular television program. You know, people are going to be familiar with it, and they might actually want to purchase it. So, in creating the 4 stimuli, I had a long named review, I had a long anonymous review, a short named review, and a short anonymous review. I also had a control group, which was in the stimulus, it would basically say, imagine the ideal online review. All right, now all of these stimulus were placed in front at the front end of the online questionnaire, and that of course led to these being 5 cells. Now my sample was 2 undergraduate mass communications classes. We sent out email invitations. They were randomly split among the 5 cells. I think I sent out about a little over 300, got about an 80-something% response rate, so it was about 286. I think we had about maybe 15 to 20% male and almost near 80% female. Now, in creating the instrument, I based the design off of previous research conducted by Dr. Lasniak at Iowa State University. Well, he and his team were able to do a factor analysis and come up with their indices. I was not. My results came out a little bit different, so I had to break my scale statements into summative indexes. There were 6 of those. I had causal attribution, I had review attitude, the review effect, reviewer characteristics, credibility, and word of mouth. I ran Cronbach's coefficient alpha on all of these indexes, and the threshold was reached. Now, all of the questions in my instrument consisted of 5-point Likert scales and 5-point semantic differential scales. And of course, the Likert scales were your typical 1 is strongly disagree to 5 strongly agree. Getting into my hypotheses now. My first hypothesis was that males would have a more positive perception of online reviews than females. So in order to do this, I ran a t-test comparing gender against all of my summative indexes. And I found significant results for causal attribution, for reviewer characteristics, for effect, and for credibility. So males were higher than females in all of these aspects. So hypothesis 1 was supported. Apparently men are more likely to have positive perceptions of online reviews than females. Now, my next 2 hypotheses are really the meat of my study. Hypothesis 2 is explicit source attribution is positively related to perceived credibility. Hypothesis 3 is that the lengthy detailed text is positively related to perceived credibility. Well, in order to get these answers, I ran a one-way ANOVA to compare the effects of the various stimuli and the created online reviews against the perceived credibility indexes. I found statistical significance. So, of course, now I'm going to run a post-hoc comparison Bonferroni. Well, I guess you could say Bonferroni had good news for one of my hypotheses and not so good news for the other. So for source attribution, not so much. I didn't have any statistical findings for source attribution, so seemingly participants, in the study didn't seem to be affected by an identifier. However, they were very affected by the length of the review. I found statistical findings all through that, and looking back at attribution theory, the length of the review is clearly a causal agent for the effect of perceived credibility. I also had a research question, and that is, are credibility of the online reviewer and the review related? I ran correlations on the multiple perceived credibility indexes. I found a ton of statistically significant findings. There were too many to list, quite frankly, between, say, credibility and characteristics, effect and attitude. So, in fact, the majority of these were actually strong correlations. So, clearly, the credibility of the reviewer and the credibility of the review itself are closely linked. So, where do we go from here? What about future research? Well, to be honest, my sample size was just undergraduate students, so it's not completely generalizable as much as it should be. So if I could get a more representative national sample and examine perhaps other independent variables such as the grammar of the review, the reviewer's gender, notes from other consumers, the rating system, etc. So there's a lot of avenues to go there. Also, the fact that we found that men were more likely to form positive perceptions on online reviews than women, I personally find that a little bit surprising. So the only thing I could surmise is that maybe men do it more out of convenience factor, and if they do it more out of convenience, then maybe they're looking at an online review going, you know what, this looks good, I'm going to take this. But again, that could lead to future research. Plus, I didn't find anything statistically significant here, but the trend showed that men were more likely to shop online than women. And so perhaps that's something else you could look at. And finally, it'd probably be a good idea to look at the perceived credibility of online feedback mechanisms and its ties to brand loyalty.